Hello everyone, Rurikhan here coming at you with a short video. Like I mentioned in the last Conscast, I want to be working on a couple of short videos just to talk about specific subjects as they come up. And this week we've had the announcement of Dark Souls 2 DLC, so I thought I'd talk a little bit about that. This DLC is going to be a trilogy, the first piece of which is going to be coming our way on the 23rd of July in the form of Crown of the Sunken King. The trilogy's name is going to be the Lost Crowns Trilogy, and it is going to revolve around kind of like following in the steps of Vendrick and recovering the crowns that he once wore, I'm assuming. So besides the crown of the Sunken King, we will eventually get the crown of the Old Iron King and the crown of the Ivory King. So some people have started crying out foul, indicating that From Software said they had no plans for DLC. And me personally, I don't usually take those statements that seriously because, I mean, in this day and age, there's always going to be DLC for tons of games, and it all depends on how the company handles its DLC. Like, for instance, if we take a look at Dark Souls 1 DLC, the Prepare to Die edition, was that a bad thing? In my opinion, no, because you got a couple of more hours of content, you've got more lore of the Dark Souls lore, more lore, of course it was Dark Souls. You've gotten 4 more bosses, you got 3 new areas, you got new gear, you got new spells, you got a bunch of new stuff with that particular expansion, and it was a reasonable amount of content for the price you paid, at least, again, in my opinion. So, do we need to be concerned about the fact that From Software is now working on DLC for Dark Souls 2? In my opinion, we don't have to concern ourselves that much due to its track record with the Prepare to Die DLC, which I really enjoyed. So it's all a matter of looking at the content once it actually comes out, and then we can actually say whether or not we need to be concerned of how From Software is handling DLC. But from its track record, there's not a whole lot of reasons to be concerned. Some people have been claiming that this content was stripped from the game in order to be sold at a later date. And I don't really agree that much with that because when you look at things, Dark Souls 2 feels like a complete game. There are some games that you play and you're like, oh, I didn't get the ending that I wanted, or whatever, and then it comes out, the piece of DLC comes out that's like, oh, but here's the ending that you've always wanted. And Dark Souls, I don't think it's going to be that. It's going to be side stories. You're going to be going back and looking at how, I'm assuming you're going to be facing the same challenges that maybe Vendrick himself faced a long time ago in order to acquire the crowns that we're looking for. I'm not necessarily sure if there is any special hidden power in the crowns. I'm going to assume there probably is, or what the significance of the crown is. I'm going to leave that for lore people like VatiVidya and Epic Name Bro to discuss the value of, not the value, but to discuss the lore of the crowns and all that. But the end of it all is, I think this DLC is going to be worthwhile, and I feel that the experience that I had with Dark Souls, and I am having with Dark Souls 2, has not been an incomplete experience. Therefore, I don't really agree with the comments of people saying this was stripped from the game. That's just my opinion, though. Now, another thing came into my mind when I started looking at the trailer, and I started thinking back to the time that Edge Magazine interviewed From Software's Tomohiro Shibuya, if you guys remember that. That was the interview that came about with the big, how should I put it, the big polarizing view on accessibility in Dark Souls 2, and people were like going ape shit over it, like, oh my god, accessibility, they're gonna make it easier. And obviously at the end of the day, we all figured out it's not really easier, and we were all worried for essentially nothing. And so it kind of feels like the same thing. They're now announcing DLC. Some people are like, oh my god, it's going to be terrible, it's going to be cheapening the game and all this. And at the end of the day, I get a feeling it's going to be very different. But going back to the topic, because I tend to veer off topic, as you guys probably noticed, was this content planned? Was the Lost Crowns trilogy planned? I have a feeling that they had the idea and that they maybe were thinking of including it in the game, but maybe they didn't have enough time, or maybe due to the fact that the game is already long as hell as is, they just decided not to put it in, and then eventually decided to release it as DLC. I'm not exactly sure what the thought process was behind it, and it's all just a bunch of speculation. But the thing that I want to point towards is, if you guys remember that particular interview with Tomohiro Shibuya, there's a time where they start talking about something, and Tomohiro Shibuya says a very important concept for us in Dark Souls 2 is the concept of eras. Eras. And at the time, I remember that I made a video about that, and I mentioned that eras is indeed very important when he says that, because it kind of references a little bit of time travel. Because he was speaking about time, eras, I can't remember exactly what was said. But at the end of the day, it was a little bit of time travel, kind of like what happened with Prepare to Die, where you went through a portal, and then you ended up in Ulasil, God knows how many years ago, because Artorias was still alive, and all that. Well, he was consumed by the abyss, but the thing is, where I'm getting at is, we never really had that time travel in Dark Souls 2. Sure, you go through the memories of the giants and you do a little bit of time traveling, so to speak, but it's not really, you're not really there. You're just kind of like reliving the memories of the giants. So it's not like you're actually going back and, you know, influencing the events that took place in the past. So I always thought to myself, it's like they didn't really deliver on that concept of eras that Tomohiro Shibuya talked about. And looking at this, looking at the Lost Crowns trilogy, and looking at specifically the second part of the Lost Crown trilogy, where they say the crown of the old Iron King, I'm assuming that we're going to go back in time, considering that during the main campaign, we actually kill what is currently the Iron King, the big lava-like demon. At least I think he's supposed to be the Iron King. Again, I'm not big into lore, so feel free to criticize me on that. But that led me to believe that we're probably going to be going to the past and retaking the steps that Vendrick took. Who knows? Maybe in a big, like, maybe in a big plot twist, the player character is Vendrick. I don't know if that's going to happen. I highly, highly doubt it. But that is like the whole eras play, the whole going back to the past and stuff. I feel that that is what this is going to be. Kind of like in line with what they did with Prepare to Die. Now, let's talk a little bit about timing, which is very important when you're talking about DLC, because nobody likes to see day one DLC. Now, Dark Souls 2 had the pre-order DLC, which was the weapons. But I can't really criticize them all that much on those weapons because, to be honest, those weapons are garbage. I don't think anybody really uses them. It's just they're a little bit of flair. I think I use one of the shields usually when I start the game. When I start a new character, I use one of the shields because a lot of characters don't start with shields. Are there any ones that start with shields? Yeah, the warrior starts with a shield, but a lot of other characters don't even start with shields, although it's fairly easy to get a shield early on in game, so it's not like you're even getting an unfair advantage. It's just like, whatever, you have a shield at the start. That's pretty much the only thing that I see in the DLC. So I don't really care that much about DLC. And those weapons, you can buy them later on in the game, so it's not even that important. So that was the DLC that we've had for Dark Souls 2. I don't think there was any other DLC. I mean, obviously you had soundtrack, stuff like that, but that doesn't really count. So in terms of timing, the console version of Dark Souls 2 came out in March. The PC version of Dark Souls 2 came out in April. So essentially, the first piece of DLC is coming out 4 months apart from the release of consoles, 3 months apart from its release on the PC. So 3 months is a reasonable timetable. It should give people enough time to go through the game as many times as they want and, you know, be willing to dive back into the game after it. It's not like, oh, 1 week after, here's some DLC and here's some more DLC and here's some more. You know, it seems like it's nice and neatly organized. So I can't really complain that much about the timing. Then there is the amount of content. That we'll only really be able to judge once the time comes. If the amount of content is comparable to the amount of content that we've got with Prepare to Die, I think it's more than fair. And I think it's actually pretty good because it's going to revitalize people's interest in the franchise. I mean, just look at how much people flipped out when they heard about Project Beast. There's definitely an interest in getting more Dark Souls content on their hands. And finally, one of the things that I wanted to address is the fact, if you guys remember, the Prepare to Die edition came out but as part of porting the game to a new platform. So when I started looking at this DLC and I started like saying, hey, when the Prepare to Die edition came out, it was because they were working on the PC version. I have to say that I've gotten a little bit of a glimmer of hope that maybe they're working on the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 versions. I know that there's a lot of people who don't like it's one of those HD remake things, I hate that, and blah, 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 blah. I know there's a lot of people who don't like that stuff, and that's okay. You're totally entitled not to like it, but I'm still entitled to really want to see a version of Dark Souls 2 on Xbox One and PlayStation 4, and I would like to see that. So it kind of gave me a little bit of hope in that field, but that's pretty much all I had to say about Dark Souls 2 DLC. I'm optimistic about it. I want to see what's going to come our way, and I want to play it. Where do you guys fall? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.